So this time I'm going to talk about integrating Power Platform with Intune using Graph. So a lot of what I talked about in the last hour is still applicable. The biggest difference is I'm not using the admin service anymore. I'm strictly making Graph calls. And if you're, either in a co-managed world or moving to Intune and you haven't learned how to talk to Graph yet, it's definitely a good time sooner than later. It's just kind of like when PowerShell was first announced. It's like, oh, I got to learn it one of those days. One of these days I got to learn PowerShell, and eventually started and kind of learn it. And it's inevitable. You just need to kind of at least get your feet wet with it. And once you get familiar with it, it's really not that bad. It's just getting over that first hump. So just like previous, why do this? Well, you can make custom admin consoles just like the one I made for the on-prem config manager. You can make them for Intune, and you can, of course, same thing, close feature gaps, and because you can. So in this case, the requirements are you've got to have Intune. Either co-managed or individual licenses. You need to have Power App per user or per app license or the developer plan. And I didn't really talk about licensing in the last one, but everybody that has an O365 or M365 E3 or E5 license owns rights to create Power Apps and Power Automate flows with the non-premium connectors. And so there's the concept of premium connectors, which are like ServiceNow connectors and connectors that custom connectors are premium. And so you can either buy a per user license, which is, I believe, $5 a month, or you can do a per app license, and you can license each individual app. And again, and then the developer plan, if your employer has not locked that down yet, you can go to just Bing Power Apps developer, and you can sign up. It's free. If your employer's locked it down, then you'll get an error. But in that developer plan, you can use premium connectors. You can share apps. You can launch apps. You can do pretty much everything you want. The big question is whether or not your admins have locked it down yet or not. So just search for Power Platform Developer Plan. And then again, just like for admin service, you have to create an Azure AD app registration for Graph with the proper API permissions. And again, if the connectors out of the box don't do what you want, then you just have to make another custom connector. So I actually had a customer ask for this. They said, we don't like the company portal. We don't like the software center. We like the iStore, the app store on the iPhone, and that's what we like. So we want to be able to customize it and put our own branding and all these things. And and we also want to have the applications that cost money go through some approval process, which, without doing a whole bunch of jumping through hoops, there really isn't any out of the box way to do with Intune today. It's you either deploy the app to the users or the groups, or you don't. And you could, have a process where they don't get added to the group unless somebody, approves. But that gets kind of messy. And it's not as much fun either. So they wanted to be able to create their own app store. So I put together this Power App that basically synchronizes all the apps from Intune and their icons and their descriptions and everything about them, categories, and synchronizes them into a data source, which I actually used a SharePoint list in this case. Again, you could use SQL. You could use a SharePoint list is free. SQL is a premium connector. But you can synchronize, and a SharePoint list does make a okay data source. It's not good for 100,000 rows, but smaller data sources, it's perfectly fine. So this Power Automate flow synchronizes all the apps from Intune into this it's actually a document library. It's not a list. And with the categories. And so how that works, what happens then, let me go back into a demo here. So I haven't really talked about solutions yet. I don't want to get too, so I'm logged in right now as this Nicole Wagner, and I just created a little shortcut on her desktop. And this is the actual app store. So this is just showing all the apps that I have. If I look in Intune, where I've got too many windows open, go to apps, you can see I have 7-zip. I have Microsoft 365, Notepad, VLC, WebEx, Power BI Desktop. And so it's all the same. And I didn't have to re-upload any icons. I didn't have to re-type in descriptions. It literally is synchronized. And how I did that was, just show real quick here. And so I don't want to get too into the weeds, but a solution, a Power Platform solution, is just like a Visual Studio solution, a combination of things. It could be multiple Power Apps, it could be multiple Power Automate flows, it could be environment variables, it could be connection references, what have you. So I created, this is actually my first solution I've ever created. And it has all the flows and the app in one place. So I literally could export this and help a customer put it in. So if I look at my flows, I have one flow that creates the SharePoint document libraries automatically and the lists. So I don't even have to do that, because the last thing you want to do is manually create lists and document libraries. So this is a one-time run flow. It goes and creates a document library, it creates a SharePoint site, creates a document library, sets the permissions to the library, creates a bunch of columns. These are all different columns. I have owner, cost, Azure AD group. So each one of these is creating a column. And even licenses owned. So I put in, you can put in, say I own 100 licenses of each of this app and 100 licenses of that app. And so it's creating all these columns. That's what most of this really is. And then it's done. Now it also is creating and you don't have to do this, but it's creating an Azure AD group for each application that it finds. So I automated that as well, so that for each app, there's a single Azure AD group. So what happens then is the user requests an app, and if the app is not free, which I put in, I'm actually using the notes field because there isn't a cost field on any app properties. So in the notes field, I put in $15, or I put in $0 or $10 or $25, whatever it is. And the logo, the icons are all synchronized directly from here into that document library. So if we look at that, we look at that document library, I will show you what it looks like. It's just literally a dumping ground. Intune app portal. Oh, and then this is my document library. So each app, that flow created a line item for each app. And the name is actually a GUID. I didn't spend much time on that, but that's one thing I'd like to fix. But you can see the description sync, the cost, the categories, everything came over from Graph. And if I click on it, it'll show the icons. So that one's obviously VLC. This one is Office. This one is, oops, Notepad++. So the icons, everything's synced. And that, that flow looks like, come on, Power Automate. Sometimes a little slow, not always though. So that flow looks like this: sync apps to SharePoint and Azure AD groups. So the first one creates all the groups. This one actually will do a daily sync, or as often as you want, all the apps in Intune, sync them over to your SharePoint list. So I'm literally, in this case, I'm actually got the client ID, tenant ID, and secret in the flow, and then it's doing that login. So this is just like the custom connector has an Azure AD authentication. This is how you would do Azure AD authentication in a flow. Same, you know, it's always this URL with your tenant ID, OAuth2 token. You always have to have, you know, you can actually change the authentication to Active Directory, and then you don't have to do all this in the body. But I just did no authentication, and I put all the stuff, I put all the client ID and secret in the body because I like doing things the hard way. But ultimately, this is just getting that token, the authentication token. And this is a parse JSON, which basically turns each property into its own dynamic variable in the flow. So now I can say, okay, this is my token, bearer access token. And now from now on in this flow, every graph call I want to make, I just put authorization and authorization header, which is this bearer access token. So as long as that header's in there, I can make as many graph calls as I want. This one is going to /mobile apps. And again, these are all documented very well. Then I parse the JSON again. And for each app, each app get the details of the app and parse it and create the icon and set the Azure, if the Azure AD group is blank, put the Azure AD group that was automatically created in the SharePoint list. Actually, this one's creating the groups, not the other one. So then it creates a group called app underscore. This is the display name of the app underscore install. And then also an uninstall. So it's creating an Azure AD group. And this is a free connector. The Azure AD connector is free. So creating groups is completely free. And then if it's an Office Suite app, I do, you know, each type of app has different properties in it. And that got a little bit complex because I started off thinking they were all the same, but I quickly realized that, you know, each app type has different properties based on if it's a line of business app or a Win32 app or what have you. So ultimately, this is then synchronizing the apps into this SharePoint list on a daily basis. Then the user launches the app. They can do a search. They can say VLC. They can say 7-zip, whatever. And I even made it so that, like, the customer might say, well, I don't like green. I like blue. So I put this little settings sprocket over here, and I say theme color blue. And now it's blue. Or, you know, I may not want the categories at the top center. I only want them on the right, for example. So now they're over here, and I can filter based on which categories I want over here. So it's very easy, you know, it's like to make a setting screen like this because, oops, I didn't mean to close that. to make things customizable. Oh, I forgot I was not in edit mode. To make things customizable, you're just setting variables. It says, if this one's selected, set color to green. If this one's red, show this logo or some other logo. Turn off dark mode. If I go to now, it's light mode. So these little things just are, dynamic properties, dynamic variables for the colors, for the fill color, for the text color, and what have you. And so then the user says, okay, I want 7-zip. It says, okay, it's free open source. It's approval required, yes, because it costs $15. And the approver is Nicole at domain.com. So I hit request, and I happen to be logged in as Nicole, so she's going to approve her own app. I don't have too many users in my. So if I go to Office, I don't know if I have Outlook installed on here. And I check her email. It's going to basically it's kicked off the workflow that sent to the app owner, which the app owner is stored in the on the properties of each application. So I have an email address on each application, and it says, "Hey, Nicole, so-and-so, Nicole Wagner wants 7-zip, and it's $15. You want to approve or deny?" Now, if I look at my flow over. Where am I? Too many windows. If I look at my, this is my actual approval flow, I can see that it's 1 minute ago it was triggered, and I can go into it, and I can see that it's waiting for an approval. So the Power App triggered the flow, and it got the app name, which in this case is 7-zip. It got the information about 7-zip. It says, okay, it costs this much, and this is the user. It's $15. And these are all just, the app cost, of course. I broke it down into variables. It gets the app information. Actually, I think I already had that. I'm not sure why I'm getting that again. Set the app cost at 15. And then I said, this is actually, let me look at it on the edit. If the app is not $0, if the app is $0, it just auto approves it. So right here, if app cost is not equal to $0, if it is, it automatically sends an email, or if it is 0, it automatically approves it. It adds the user to a group, which I have first getting their user object ID from Azure AD, and then running a child flow, which just adds a user to a group. So it's like 4 steps. It updates the SharePoint list, which is a separate list that's tracking who requested what, sets it to approved, sends the end user an email, hey, your request has been auto approved due to being free. Please allow 24 hours, and then terminate. If it's not free, it sends an email to the owner of the app, gives them an approve or deny, and then once it's approved or denied, if it's equal to approve, it does the same thing, adds the requester to an Azure AD group. And then I'm also got a little fancy and posted an adaptive card to a chat channel to let the end user know, hey, you just got approved, rather than just spamming them with an email. So if I come in here and I click approve, that flow is going to suddenly take off again. It's going to be no longer waiting where it was waiting. And yep, now it's coming down here and it's going down here. See, it just finished. So now it just sent something to Teams. If I go back and look at Teams, oh, look at that. Power Automate, send a card. Click on it. Your application request for 7-zip has been approved and will arrive shortly. Oops. Yeah, there it is. 4:42. That's right now, Central Time. So you can immediately let the requester know that. You can also use adaptive cards to show radio buttons for approve or deny. So you don't have to use the native approval connector in Power Automate. You can actually just use these adaptive cards. Now, adaptive cards might sound overwhelming, but the nice thing is if you go to adaptivecards.io, it'll help you make them. So you just click Get Started, and let's see, authoring cards. You actually come, and I haven't done this in a while, so I'm trying to remember where it starts. There's actually
it's like a UI designer, right?
Yeah. There's a little UI designer in here somewhere. Steam Explorer, browse.
There it
available.
is. Nick, it was the next link down. Yeah. Interactive visualizer, I think.
Thank you. I knew it was in here somewhere. Oh, that's nice. Hold on, refresh. That's not true. Exists. It's not gone.
Honest, I know it exists. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely exists. Where the heck did it go? Temporarily broken. Wow.
Yeah, I've played with that some. While you're looking, I'll just ramble for a second. It is pretty slick because, you basically, they have some example cards, and then they also have, just the IDE, so you draw it out, and then it's just variable replacement, right, to leverage it. So it's pretty slick.
Yeah, so that link was broken. I had to just go, I went to Designer. That was the more direct route. So they got a broken link. But if you click on Designer, then you come in here, and this is a sample one, and you can see you can have buttons, and you just literally say, I don't want to set due date. I don't want to view, and so you just come in here and say, I want a different button, or I want different columns, choices, toggles, whatever. And you literally just drag them on to this canvas here, and it's dynamically building the payload based on you dragging these adaptive cards. Now, what's cool is adaptive cards are not only supported in Teams, but they're also supported in Outlook. So you can actually have Outlook emails with adaptive cards that ask, it's a poll, or ask for, who's going to attend this meeting or whatever, some kind of dynamic adaptive card in your email. And the part that you want to use to make sure you create it is Outlook actionable messages, if it's for Outlook or, Teams in the dark mode or light mode. So this will make adaptive cards for all different purposes. But ultimately, you just take this JSON when you're all done, and it's the way you want. You take this JSON and you post it into your adaptive card action. So I go to Edit, and I look at my adaptive card setting, and there's just a blank where you paste it into, and every message that comes out from that bot or person, you can send it as the flow bot or as a specific user, or from Power Virtual Agents, but you literally just paste it in here, and you can put in any kind of dynamic info. So this is going to put in your application request for app name, which is a variable that I set. The recipient's a variable, username. So all these are variables that I set further up here that are coming from either the Power App or the SharePoint list. Like app cost comes from the SharePoint list, and the requester name comes from the Power App. And so all that ends up being populated in here, and then also sending an email. And then if I have this app requests list, and this is all the app requests, and if it's approved, not approved, the cost, the date. And so you can quickly see that if you point a Power BI dashboard to this, and I have one, I just don't know if I'd be able to find it quick enough. I have a Power BI dashboard. I pointed at this. It'll show, hey, this app's costing this much. It's been approved, installed this many times, so it's very easy to make a nice Power BI dashboard showing what's being installed and how much it's cost and licensing and so forth. And then the app licenses is decrementing. I have a flow that's decrementing, or it's actually in that the same approval workflow, taking one away from the total license count every time somebody approves that app. So you can track, how many licenses you have left. Of course, it's a little manual. You got to put in how many you have first. It's not going to, you suppose if you have them in ServiceNow or you have them in some other license management tool, you could have that syncing over, of course. But I just put in some number, rudimentary number, just to make sure it would decrement. So that's the App Store. And that's actually all the things that it does that I just covered. And so some other ideas that I've had are like, I've actually created a Power virtual agent, which is really just a bot that you chat with, that will look up your machine in on-prem config manager via the admin service and give you your MAC address or give you your IP address. You can do things like that with Power Virtual Agents or requesting apps. If the bot can list all the apps from Intune and then approve, add the user to the group that way. Also, I've done things like creating and sample, very small. It doesn't even look nice enough to show, but I created a Power app that actually displays in Software Center. Because Software Center, you can actually put in an HTML or URL in there, and it'll display any web page. So a Power App is nothing more than a web page. Ultimately, if you have a URL to the Power App, it will display in a browser. So you can actually put Power Apps into Software Center into your custom tabs, which is an out-of-the-box feature of Software Center. So literally pasting the app URL will do that. I think I have, let me see if I may have, it's probably broken by now because I haven't run it in a long time, but you could have like a self-service app that says, like this is my PC info. I don't know if this is even going to work. So this is launching a Power app. Oh, that's the App Store. This one, I don't know what it does, but it just says test. Oh, that's just a SharePoint site. So literally you can put in any Power app you make in here. The end user could say, hey, what's my PC's slow, or I ran out of disk space or something. And based on what they select, the Power Automate can go run your PowerShell script to try and remediate that, right? Delete all the MP3s because you're out of space, or format C, whatever you want to do to fix that machine based on the user's complaint in the Software Center. So that just opened up all kinds of like, wow, this thing is just, I could just play all day making apps for end users and doing all this kind of stuff. And the app functions the same way it does in a browser, because again, it's just a web page at the end of the day. So you could, I have a run script that does install all updates now, which is like 3 lines of PowerShell. So you can have server owners right-clicking or left-clicking or selecting their servers and then saying patch now, and it runs the install all updates. And then you could have an optional reboot button. The cool thing about that is I've actually taken, so Power Apps can be embedded into Power BI dashboard, and Power BI dashboard can be embedded into Power Apps. So you can actually take your patching dashboard that shows what patches, what servers and workstations are missing what patches, and have a Power App that says, okay, this one's missing patches, install all patches now. And it does all the process, hurries up and does a software update scan, and boom, you've got suddenly you're compliant. And literally, like I said, 3 lines of code will kick off all updates that are deployed to the machine via config manager. And one restart, is of course just it's 1 line. So just like the admin service connector, I started a graph connector, and I started thinking, okay, what's the things that I would need to do? Well, I want to get all groups. And that's just groups. Graph.microsoft.com v1.0 groups. Again, you could also go to Graph Explorer and find or try these things if you haven't. It's very very easy once you kind of understand what you're doing. So if you just log in, you can log in your tenant and actually see real data about your tenant. Where's my login? I forgot. Oh, am I logged in? Yeah, so you log in, and then you should be able to do this at your, in your tenant, because most users have at least read access to Azure AD. But you could go to users, like users, and say all users in the org get. And so it puts it in, it puts the URL in, and you can say run query. And here's the response. So this is all the users in the org. So I don't have to use Postman, but I can use Graph Explorer. I can copy this URL. I can come over to my custom connector, and I can paste it into import from sample and paste the response into here, which is, again, it's available on Graph Explorer. I'm clicking too many things. Let me go. I'm fast with the Alt Tab, but it gets me every time. So you just copy the response down here and paste it into. Let me close some of these before and that was me watching that last video. You paste it into this body and click import, and then you go and test it. So just like testing it in, well, this is get all groups, but you can test it in here just like you tested it in Graph Explorer. You go test, and oops, I got a 4.0. Oh, yeah, my token. So I'd have to reconnect. I haven't, this tokens was connected in February, and Azure AD tokens are only good for 90 days. But anyway, each one of these things, if I add a new, I think I just have to refresh or make a new connection. Let's see. The lifetime of an Azure AD token is 90 days, and then it comes with a refresh token. And as long as you refresh, as long as you're connected and you refresh within the 90 days, that token won't expire. So, but I haven't used this test and this connection that I did. So now it's 7:15. Yeah, so now I got a 200, which is good. So I got all my groups, all Rimco users. And so now, I have one action, get user. I can put in the user email, Russ or do Nicole at russrimmerman.com, test, and I can get Nicole's info and her title and all that stuff. The chat, I just looked on Teams, the Teams Graph API for Teams, and got the URL for that, pasted it in, pasted the response, boom, I start a chat message. And that's how I did that in that Power App. And starting a chat message is different from sending a chat message. So you have to, step one, initiate the chat. Step two, send a chat message. Or you can get chat messages if you want to, get them ones coming back. Now, you may say, wow, this is a lot of actions, but another cool thing is if you go in and create in Postman, you create all of these actions in Postman first, so you can test them all in Postman. Looking for Graph. You can not only put them into Postman and test them, but you can also export. Once you have all of them working, you can export this. This is also called a collection. Funny, everybody's using the word collection these days. So you can also export this collection and import it as a custom connector. So if you have all, you go into, Postman and you do all this testing and you say, okay, I want to, figure out how to list own devices, and I want to get BitLocker keys, and you do all these things in here. Once you're done and you have a whole slew of things that you want to do in Intune, you can just go Dataverse, custom connector, new custom connector, and you have import a Postman collection. And so literally just by clicking on export, where is it? Oh, wait a minute. Where did export go? I just did this the other day. Where did export go? Okay, I lost export, but wait a minute. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. Somehow there's an export collection. I don't know why I've lost it, but you can export the collection and import it straight in as a custom connector. And then the only thing you'll have to do, of course, is put in your Azure AD app, your graph.microsoft.com. Actually, it does populate that based on the import, but you'll then have to put in your client ID, your client secret, and the resource URL of that Azure AD app. And then, just like the admin service, take the redirect URL. And so if I look at my graph connector, I have this F graph, this one. And I go to, so this is my client ID, F50, tenant ID. And if I go to API permissions, I've given this connector permissions to do just about everything under the sun. Of course, as a best practice, you want to do, least permission that's required, but you can see all the different things. You can see things in Office Forms. You can see things, BitLocker key read.all, chat messages, Teams calls. You can make Teams calls from a Power App. That's pretty wild. OneNotes, you can tie into, there's Teams again, list all teams, you can create teams. So just, it's as easy as coming into API permissions and clicking add a permission, clicking on graph, and then you decide, do I want it to run as the user, which is delegated, or do I want it to run as a privileged service principal or service, essentially a service account? Delegated would run as the user. And then you just go into the section where you want to give the permissions, and all the graph permissions are in here, from calendars to Teams to OneNotes to what have you. Device management for Intune. So that's really, it's just like admin service. It's pretty much the same as far as permissioning and the custom connector. And so really, the possibilities are endless with this. If you have different gaps or things that you're needing to accomplish, that you want to make it easy for help desk or easy for other teams to do things without giving them full in console or telling them how to get to Intune via portal.azure and do this and do that. You can bring all your favorite buttons into one place, right? You can get BitLocker key on a button, and you can look at the device, what's installed on the device, and another button, all on one screen, versus having to click around in Azure or the Endpoint Management Admin Center and finding where it all is, and then it moves around on you because they changed something. So as long as you know that graph call, or you look up that graph call in the documentation, and that graph call is valid, it's just going to continue to work. And that's pretty much all I have. unless anybody wants to see anything else or any other questions besides the ones we had earlier. Was this helpful? Is anybody going to go make a Power App today, or somebody already making one?
I definitely have more to dabble, more to play with. So I think this is, to me, it was helpful. You got a couple good comments there. I saw a little hand clap. Yeah, hopefully this is something you guys see how you can leverage. I really like the low code type of scenario, right? You can spend a lot less time and deliver some results. One of the things we talked about at MMS recently was, well, these things we're doing in low code here, for example, just thinking about like your Power Automate and being able to make those calls, it is certainly simplified here and makes it a lot easier. Technically, you could do this with other tools or even PowerShell, right? If you don't need a UI, if you're just doing automation, but there's more work involved, right, as you start getting down that path. So I think a lot of people could start at this level, and if it's something that's used a lot and something you want to bring into other scenarios, you certainly could. But I think, to me, this is a quick way to get things up and running.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is that client deleter. I mean, it's very basic. I just literally drop 3 controls on, hit delete, and then it's writing to this text file called flow.txt, which looks like it just did. So it wrote the machine name there, and if I come in and refresh, it's not gone yet. There it goes. It's gone. So that's simple to delete a client.
Yeah, pretty slick.
And you can do it from your phone, right? So Power Apps, when you make a Power App, you can make it mobile form factor, tablet form factor. And once you make it, it'll work on both. So Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, browser, what have you. There's a Power app for every platform. So you can run it on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. Any other questions?